This episode of Raiders Fan Radio is brought to you by DeadPiratesSports.com. That's Raider gear for the Raider family. Check out DeadPiratesSports.com. Raiders Fan Radio. You're listening to Sonny and Murph from the Dago Dungeon. That's right, a podcast by Raiders fans for Raiders fans, the only fans that matter.
Touchdown! Kenny Stabler goes all the way!
We miss you, we love you, and we'll see you in the Hall of Fame.
When you have great coaches, then after you have great coaches, you get great players. You have a great organization, and you tell them one thing. Just win, baby.
I love this team. I think this team can win. I think this team can win.
What is up, Raider Nation? Your old buddy Murph back again here for another fantastic episode of Raiders Fan Radio. We're going to call this episode number 71. Uncle Mosh, do you know any players off the top of your head that wore number 71? Nobody remembers Bill Pickle. Nobody remembers, well, of course they do. Bill Pickell, defensive tackle, defensive end from 1983 to 1990. Kelvin Corver, Richard Tyson, Nate Parks, maybe.
Parks.
We've always been huge
Parks fans.
Nate Parks fan. Anyways, we're being silly, but welcome to number 71 here on Raiders Fan Radio. We wanted to get this episode out to you because we have kind of a time-sensitive episode, Uncle Mosh. We have what?
Well, hey, it's getting down there. It's getting down to time-sensitive time.
And so, because it's time-sensitive, we have a free agent spectacular, we call it.
We're going to release this episode like players that are released to free agency. We're releasing this episode.
So we are going to release this. This is, well, today, if you're listening to this on the first day, it will be Monday, or it might even be Sunday night. It might be late Sunday night.
Late
Sunday. So, and the reason we're getting it out is that we had a fantastic interview with one Austin Gayle. He's from Pro Football Focus, and the guy is legit, Uncle Mosh.
Oh, my gosh.
He knows stats. I mean, just can spit them out right off the top of his head. Completely in tune with not only what the current goings on are of our Raiders, but what happened, everything leading up to this point. And so he's a plethora of knowledge, and keep up, because the guy talks fast and he throws it all out there. And so it's a great interview, Raider Nation. We hope you dig it. And then after this episode, we're going to have actually another episode, number 72, coming a little bit later in the week, and that will feature an interview with one of the guys that
Smitty.
Austin is talking about. Our new best friend, friend of the show, Keith Smith, new
man.
fullback from the Raiders. So anyway, so we're going to go ahead and play that out for you now, and we'll see you on episode 72, and enjoy this interview with Austin Gayle here on episode number 71.
Raiders Fan Radio, free agent special.
All right, Raider Nation, welcome into Raiders Fan Radio. One Austin Gayle. He is the Consumer Insights Coordinator for Pro Football Focus. You can find him on Twitter at @AustinGayle_PFF. And not only does he have those amazing credentials, but he's also a former Oakland Raiders season ticket holder and Oakland native. Welcome to the show, Austin Gayle.
Thanks, man. I'm glad you brought that up. I do miss my season tickets now, living in Cincinnati PFF headquarters. But the Raiders are coming to Cincinnati this year, so I'll be going to that game for sure.
Excellent, and hopefully that'll be a big old Raiders W there, and also the return of one Paul Gunther, I guess, to Cincinnati, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It should be a nice homecoming. Hopefully he's able to come away with a W and get his own team.
Good deal. Well, hey, Austin, we have a lot to talk to you about today, and just to start off, though, just to kind of reflect back a little bit, Last time we had you on the show, I think it was like October last year, and we talked a lot about the changes in the offense from 2016 to 2017, kind of what some of the wholesale changes that Todd Downing was making. And of course, that was pretty early on in the season. What do you think now, not only reflecting back on that and how the changes went from 16 to 17, but give us a little bit of a crystal ball on what you think the continuing changes or the wholesale changes will be for the Raiders going from 17 even into 18 with John Gruden.
Yeah, to reflect it, what kind of happened was had an offensive coordinator that maybe had, good play design and kind of understood, the quarterback position a little very well, obviously a former quarterbacks coach, but where you saw a significant lack and significant weaknesses was understanding his own strengths and weaknesses on his own player, own personnel, and then also understanding the strengths and weaknesses of opposing personnel. So designing plays and calling plays to fit the strengths and weaknesses of the opposing and your own personnel just came up, as a weakness over and over and over again for Todd Downing, whether it be, lining up, making Cordero Patterson the first read on a 3rd and 9 on the outside with a hitch. It just didn't, a lot of that just didn't make sense. He didn't use players most effectively. He didn't use players to fit their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. And you saw a similar aspect on the defensive side with Ken Norton Jr. Obviously, dropping Bruce Irvin to coverage more than you'd like, lining him up at cornerback, slot cornerback more than you'd like. The blitz calls and disguising certain things just wasn't his strong suit. He did not play to the players' advantages. And I think that's what Gruden needs to do if they are going to turn around to kind of crystal ball this thing forward. I think John Gruden, with teaming up with obviously Greg Olson coming back, they're going to be able to ideally come together, identify the weaknesses and strengths on these personnel, and more effectively game plan for each game and put players in a position to succeed.
So with that, offensively, are we looking at more of like a look of where we see like maybe Cooper running in the slot a little more, kind of reflective back on what John Gruden used to do with Jerry Rice and Timmy Brown, kind of move them inside offensively, and then on defensively, do you expect to see guys like Bruce Irvin with his hand in the dirt more often, rushing the passer, and a lot less of coverage type things, or what?
Yeah, so offensively, I think what Gruden's going to do is I think he wants to move wide receivers around a bit. You obviously see that they have interest in Ryan Grant. Whether or not they sign him is still yet to be determined, but the interest itself kind of points to me and kind of tells me that John Gruden is interested in bringing in multiple receivers that are capable of running in the slot and outside. Jordy Nelson is excelled in the slot. Amari Cooper is excelled in the slot. Ryan Grant has had success in the slot in limited capacities. I think having such versatile receivers allows him to kind of mix it up, put people in different places to find matchups and again, attack weaknesses in opposing personnel. And outside of the passing game, he obviously brought in 2 blocking tight ends in Derek Carrier and re-signing Lee Smith. He brings in another fullback to pair with Tamiz Olawale. I think we're going to see some heavy play action, some heavy run sets and aggressive running downhill and really loading up the box on early downs and allowing for play action and certain receivers to get open later and on longer downs.
John Gruden famously once said, quote, the best thing about running for 4 yards on first down is that you can do it again. And so, he's obviously going to focus on running the football. I loved the way he used to use Zach Crockett back in the day. If you look at Zach Crockett's stats back in the early 2000s, the guy used to have 20 touchdowns on 22 carries or whatever for total of 50 yards. It was just he was the guy inside the 5. I feel like that Marshawn is going to kind of take on that role, and then all these players that you're mentioning, all this beef and all these amazingly blocking type players that he's putting in. But all that said, do you think all that is going to translate well to today's NFL? Because we know that it's different now, right? We're looking at 3 wide receiver sets and like offenses have evolved. Can that bringing the game back to 1998 work in 2018?
Yeah, I think it will translate to the NFL if it's used in limited doses. I think everything's great in moderation. If you want to beef up your heavy sets, similar to maybe how the Baltimore Ravens run their offense, or also Kyle Shanahan runs a lot of 2 tight end with a fullback set, run play action out of it, things like that. It's how much you commit to it. If you're only running two wide receiver sets, 20% of the game, you're going to run into some issues. However, if you want to have an offense that's a little less lenient on the spread, and 4 wide receiver sets every play like the Raiders offense was last year and even the year before. Obviously you saw a lot of shotgun sets with no tight ends, more slot receivers, and kind of that spread offense. If you want to dial it back a little bit, I think it totally translates to the NFL. However, you can't completely commit to it like a Vince Lombardi of old, or go way back to the 90s and try and run the ball 40 times a game. I think you can increase the percentage you do that, but you can't have it completely take over your offense, especially when you have a quarterback like Derek Carr who comes from a spread system and has been running at least something similar to a spread system his entire NFL career. So
you mentioned Derek Carr. How does that translate then to when bringing on Jordy Nelson? Just again, thinking back, and I haven't watched old Raider games in a long time, but just thinking back to Gruden's West Coast offense, it used to be really timing oriented. And the reason that guys like Brown and Rice, later in their career were so successful is that it was all about timing. It was all about, the Rich Gannon and the timing. It wasn't about, what am I trying to say? Athleting, whatever. They weren't getting. They weren't. It was okay that Jerry Rice had lost a step. It was okay because it was all about the timing and the quickness of the routes and his ability to work open. Do you see that going on now with Jordy? And is that the trade-off between Jordy and like what Michael Crabtree was able to bring?
I think there's going to be a bigger emphasis on timing. I think that's how Gruden is able to have success like those guys, like you said. I think he's going to be able to run play action and do better with Derek Carr's footwork and certain drops to make sure wide receivers are breaking right when he hits his back foot and things like that. I think John Gruden is an elite play caller. He's great at play design. He knows how to put people in positions to succeed. That's the reason. That's his claim to fame. Yes, he's been a head coach. He's done other things. He's tried to work his way into being in a GM role too, kind of like likes to run the salary cap and all that kind of stuff. But when he's at his best, he's calling plays, and I think that's what he's going to be able to help Derek Carr with, creating easy first reads and easy second read progressions, whether it's on a play action boot. You got the fullback in the flat to start, and then you got a tight end crossing over the top. There's easy reads, there's easy timing plays that allow quarterbacks to get settled early in games, and also just allows for a level of consistency that the Raiders really haven't seen.
Hey, Austin, let's take it over to a different side of the ball. I do want to ask you about defense because there's been a lot of moving parts on defense, but also I want to ask you about special teams. It's kind of an often overlooked as far as analysis perspective. We don't really analyze special teams a ton, but with Rich Bisaccia coming in, taking over the special teams, coming over from Dallas, he's already brought a couple of guys with him, right, from Dallas that were special teamers for him. How do you think, and then also the Raiders made Andrew DePaula the highest paid long snapper in the league. What do you think about this kind of re-emphasis on special teams, a refocus on special teams that the Raiders are doing?
I think the Raiders, lost some depth, and I think special teams wasn't what it was at in the year prior to 2017 season. And I think when you got a guy like Bisaccia be able to come in and coach some players from his former team, and Kyle Wilber is an excellent special teamer and provides great linebacker depth. The fullback played very well on special teams. He's very versatile, run, kickoff, coverage, punt, and all that stuff. And he also provides depth at the fullback position, a position that obviously John Gruden values. And then you bring in DePaul, and I think that's just out of need. He was the best available long snapper on the market. He ranked 7th in snap accuracy last season, which we cover at PFF being if it's too high, too low, or it skips in the dirt, and all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily always a missed snap and a missed kick. But when it's too high, too low, it makes it difficult for the holder or the punter to receive the snap. That's when they start to get docked for accuracy. And he was the best available. And when you got to fill an obvious need, we know what it's like when you have to put in a backup long snapper in the middle of a game. It can ruin you. And to bring in a guy that's proven to be consistent, 4 years into his career, yes, he's 30 years old, but for a long snapper, that's pretty young. And I think it was an overall smart move. And they didn't put a lot of money into it, but at least investing the time and the effort into analyzing that they had a need there, and bringing in those 3 guys, I think it makes a lot of sense.
All right, last up, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. This is arguably the biggest, well, aside from maybe Nelson, the biggest splashes, I think, on defense, and certainly the biggest focus for the Raiders, which they needed to. They re-signed Justin Ellis in the middle, which is good. But I want to talk about some of the other free agents. Let's start off with, I've been working on this name. I think it's Tahir. I don't think you pronounce the H. Tahir Whitehead, coming over from Detroit, outside linebacker, biggest contract, 3 years, $18 million. Of course, we still don't know what they're going to do in the draft, and we don't know what they're going to do with Bowman. But Whitehead can kind of move in and out, right? Like he's played in the middle, he's played outside linebacker. Do you think obviously it was the biggest splash money-wise, but do you think this is going to be the biggest impact, so at least in the front seven for the Raiders on defense?
For front seven-wise, yes. I think overall the biggest impact is going to be Rashaan Melvin. The Rashaan Melvin signing at corner was such a significant need, and I think he's someone that can play very, very well when given the opportunity. But going back to Whitehead, this is a guy that can play in Gunther's Gunther's probably going to run more 4-3 looks as we've seen in some of the signings, and obviously his track record, a weak side outside linebacker role. He's a very good run defender, not necessarily in block sitting head on and taking on big contact, but he's a splasher. He can avoid blocks at a very elite level and get into the backfield and penetrate, but his coverage ability lacks. I was a little upset in the fact that we're bringing a linebacker that, again, struggles with coverage, especially when we haven't been able to find that answer at the linebacker position in terms of coverage that can lock up on some tight ends and running backs and people coming out of the backfield. But in terms of run defense, I think he's outstanding. He has all the ability in the world to kind of excel as a run defender. However, with his coverage ability lacking, I still think there's a little bit of a need at linebacker.
Well, we could end up, depending on where the Raiders go with, I like Shaquem Griffin. He's probably the favorite story of the combine and whatnot, but he's somebody that can certainly run with a tight end. It sure would be cool to see, not only with that signing, but then see them bring back Bowman and then draft a quality linebacker. We could end up with some depth, which is something the Raiders haven't had in forever at linebacker, right? We could come out of this entire offseason with depth like we hadn't seen in, 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah, I agree. If they're able to re-sign Bauman and Corey James can get healthy, Corey James is a wild card in this situation because I think he's had very, very good games and put together solid experience when healthy. But that knee injury has hurt him, and he's not been able to see the field as much as we need him to properly develop. I mean, this guy played along the edge at Colorado State. This guy didn't really have a role defined at Colorado State, and then now we're trying to play him at linebacker and get him as much experience as we can. But he's just been hurt. And I think if he can stay healthy, and you have Navarro Bowman signed, you have Whitehead there, maybe you pick up a linebacker in the draft. I'm not saying maybe first round, especially if they bring back Bowman. I think there's needs elsewhere. But then you start to have this rotation that I start to like. Markel Lee can come in on rundowns, and Nicholas Morrow's proven okay in coverage coming out of Division III undrafted. I think just give this guy a full off season. You start to see a rotating linebacking core that has, strengths and weaknesses all across the board, but collectively could become a strength on this unit. It all depends on experience, though. There's such lack of experience outside of Whitehead, and if they do sign Bowman on this Raiders roster at the linebacker position. Corey James hasn't had experience. Markel Lee was injured all last year. Nicholas Morrow played the most snaps, I think, of any Raiders linebacker last year, and he's undrafted out of a Division III school. I think get these guys some experience, and you'll start to see this thing turn around.
You mentioned a minute ago about Rashaan Melvin. Let's go back up into the secondary a little bit. I mean, you mentioned it's going to be the biggest impact. This guy should be a starter day one, right? He should start opposite Conley, probably despite what the Raiders do in the draft. And it's certainly a possibility. And again, they could go defensive back high up. How much of a role did this feel? Obviously, we see the departure of Sean Smith. We know the departure of Emerson. It seems like every year we have 2 new starting corners for the Raiders. It seems like that's one of those positions that Reggie hasn't figured out. We've gone from Shante Spencer and Ron Bartell and Carlos Rogers. Like we've had this carousel of DBs. Are we finally, with Melvin and Conley and who knows, maybe another draft pick, are we finally going to settle in a little bit when it comes to cornerback?
I don't know if we're ready to settle yet. I think Darian Conley hasn't had enough experience to say he's going to be the cornerback of the future. He might be here 3 or 4 or 5 years, and I think and the same with Rashaan Melvin. He signed a 1-year deal. If he does play outstanding, it's going to be tough to re-sign him at the amount of money he's going to be asking for. I think he's another short-term solution, even if he does have success, because he's going to require a lot of money if he does rank inside the top 10 in PFF grades and locks down people on the outside. However, thinking just short term, I think 2018, you have Conley, you have Melvin. I think there's still a needed slot corner, even though Marcus Gilchrist has played in the slot. I think you still need another defensive back because TJ Carey is also gone too. I ended up signing with Cleveland. I think you still need another corner to be able to come in with Melvin and Conley because there's, Melvin had he's a 1-year wonder. You can tag him with that as long as you want. He had a very good year last year, and with an increased snap count, can he reproduce? Darian Conley is still kind of a rookie. He only played 92 defensive snaps last year. We don't know what this guy's going to do. Obviously, we have a lot of faith in his potential, but there's still a lot of question marks there, especially with the injury. I think they need to bring in another defensive back as early as 10 in the draft.
Well, there's a lot of people that agree with you, and I'm leaning that way too, especially if Ward falls to them in the draft. That could be an amazing sign. Just to round out some of these signings here, Sharice Wright, like you mentioned, Gilchrist, Tank Carradine, any of these guys, are these depth type signings? Either of these three guys going to see any kind of starting time or significant playing time, you think?
I think Carradine is the most, kind of the most interesting one, because this is a guy who, early in his San Francisco career, started to play a little outside linebacker, didn't really have the success that they wanted. Then they moved him more to a 4-3 defensive end role. Started to play very well, specifically against the run before, but he was only in a limited capacity. Only ended up playing about 250 defensive snaps. He hasn't played more than 300 defensive snaps in any single season of his career. Get this guy in a rotational role, and this is where I like it. When Bruce Irvin and Khalil Mack are on the field, bookending the edges, I think there's a lot of potential there in terms of success. When one of them needs to take a breather and we have to put in Shalik Calhoun or James Kauser, it's a significant weakness. It's a significant hole in the defense. Having him to be that third rotational edge defender in Gunther's defense and possibly move inside on passing downs, deep passing downs, I think that's going to be an exciting signing. I think he could fill a need, a subtle need for this Raiders defense.
That's awesome. That's a great point, because absolutely with the way that kind of Calhoun and Ward, they really haven't worked out, right? So to have somebody like that can kind of fill that spot, that sounds to me like an excellent fit. Hey, Austin, we're going to let you go here. One last thing I wanted to ask you about, though. The draft is a little bit of a ways away, and of course, everybody gets favorite players, and you can kind of throw a dart sometimes, especially when you talk about later round picks. You see so much on the internet of, the Raiders need to get this guy or that guy. But I want to ask you about a guy, because although you're a Bay Area guy, you also went to school in San Diego, and I want to ask you about this running back, Rashad Penny, out of San Diego State. The guy's 5'11", 220, runs a 4.46. Dude's a beast, right? Is that something that you think the Raiders could potentially entertain in a later round? I know there's a lot of running backs out there. He could be in the third, fourth round type guy, right?
Absolutely, and this is one of my favorite guys to talk about. Obviously, I'm glad you researched the alma mater at San Diego State. Had plenty of opportunities when I was at the college newspaper there to interview Rashad Penny. The guy's a workhorse, always the last guy to lead practice. He's working with Nick Botta, the quarterback turned fullback. They'd work together after practice to kind of build that chemistry. When you're blocking this way, I'm going this way. On this play, you're doing this, and like that partnership kind of made his senior season for what it was, this historic senior season. He ends up running faster than Donnell Pumphrey, who was supposed to be the scat back for San Diego State the year prior, who broke the NCAA rushing record. He runs faster than him with a lot more height and a lot more weight on his frame. And this guy, I love his off-field. I love his on-field. I think he fits perfectly, and he has the potential to become a feature back. He can be your first down and second down back. He still needs work in pass protection and pass catching ability. But, he's admitted to that, and those are weaknesses that he wants to perfect at the next level. And a lot of people overlook his return ability. He broke a bunch of records as a kick returner at San Diego State, taking kicks all the way back to the house. And you bring this guy in, he's got special teams, immediate special teams, value, and obviously change of pace back value as a running back. I think day 2, I don't see this guy making it to day 3. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't see this guy making it to day 3. Day 2, you take this guy off the board as a Raiders team, and then you instantly have a premier backup behind Marshawn Lynch. That isn't Doug Martin. Doug Martin's a great back, and I like him as a change of pace. Rashad Penny brings similar skill set to Marshawn Lynch and can fill in if Lynch were to go down with injury.
Well, even if Marshawn and Martin carry the load this year, they're gone next year, right? Or essentially, even if they're not gone, contractually, physically, we know what it's like for running backs. God bless them, but when they get to 30 years old, they kind of fall off a cliff a little bit. And so, there are the Curtis Martins of the world that carry on their career through their 30s and still do well. But for the most part, they Emmitt Smith it. Once it's over, it's over. So to have somebody else coming up behind them, and especially a quality player like you mentioned on the field and off the field, I think it'd be great. I think he'd be an excellent signing for this football team. And I hope you're right that he goes high, but I hope that the Raiders are the ones that kind of catch him. You know what I mean? That if he is,
I think you make a great point there. I think you make a great point in that Marshawn Lynch and Doug Martin aren't long-term solutions. Doug Martin signed a 1-year deal. Marshawn Lynch only has 1 year left on his deal. I doubt they bring either of those two back. And then behind them, you got some youngsters, DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard, which I think one of those two is going to see the practice squad this year. I think they're going to bring in another back that isn't 5'9". You can't have 3 5'9" backs on the roster. I'm sorry. Yeah. You need to bring in another guy that's over 6 foot. And I think bringing in a guy in this year's draft, specifically a loaded running back class. John Kelly out of Tennessee, Rashad Penny out of San Diego State, Sony Michel out of Georgia. There's so many talented backs here. I think the Raiders would be smart to take one on day 2. If they have to wait till day 3 and maybe pick a later guy, I totally understand. But to really, breed into the system, give him a full year, give him maybe 20 to 30 carries this season, but then next season be able to maybe promote him into a future role. I think that's the way the Raiders need to go.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, and I certainly hope they do it. Well, Austin, we want to be sensitive to your time here. We appreciate you coming and joining us here on Raiders Fan Radio. Your knowledge it's amazing, man. It's impressive, the way you're able to just rattle this stuff off. So you're always welcome back. Please come back and join us anytime. Once again, it's Austin Gayle. He's at Pro Football Focus. You can find him on Twitter, @AustinGayle_PFF, and support him, support what they're doing over there. If you don't follow any of the Pro Football Focus guys, Raider Nation, do it. It is amazing. These guys know how many, like all the NFL teams now pretty much, right? Or use you all for their stats and for their accounting of this stuff. Is that right, Austin?
Absolutely. Right now, we're working with 32 of all 32 teams. Right now, we're working with them to help with scouting. We're helping with on play calling and all that stuff. We're working with all 32. We got 20 plus college teams as well, also in working with us. It's a great partnership. And obviously, follow me on Twitter at @AustinGayle_PFF, but also come to the site. We got a lot of good stuff at Pro Football Focus right now. We got draft guide, free agency guide, QB guide. There's so much good things looking right now, and I think Pro Football Focus, it's not the off season for us. It shouldn't be the off season for you. You should definitely come through.
Excellent. Well, very well done. All right. Well, thank you again, Austin. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right, bud. See you.
Hey, boys and girls, you got Uncle Mosh here from Raiders Fan Radio telling you about DeadPiratesSports.com's latest amazing offer. That's right, Captain Darkside's Treasure Chest Fan Box. They're a welcome idea for all Raider fans. They make a great gift idea. That's something all of us Raiders fans want is more Raiders swag. And where are you going to get better swag than from Captain Darkside's Treasure Chest? These treasure chests include shirts, Raider hats, Raider merchandise, tons and tons of other Raider accessories. Captain Darkside's Treasure Chests are full of awesome Raider gear. They come in 3 sizes to choose from. They got the small ones, the medium ones, and the large ones. $29.99, $59.99, and $99.99. Infants, kids, and special collector's boxes with autographed player merchandise are also available. And when you buy a fan box, you're automatically entered in a special contest and giveaways for life. Like we are Raiders fans for life. Plus, some of these random boxes have gold coins in them. If you get a gold coin in your box, you're an instant winner of cool random Raider gear. As an added bonus, every purchase you will receive in your email all the cool, informative, and latest breaking Raider news from Raiders Fan Radio every month at no additional charge. Go on, sign up, get your hands on Raiders Captain Darkside's Treasure Chest boxes. DeadPiratesSports.com.